My name's Alex Barsky. I am a comic artist and animator, and I'm originally from Southern California, but in 2009 I moved to New York City, and my experiences in New York City, it really expanded my perceptions of the world, and it expanded my perception of social consciousness, and I was educated on a lot of different things here, and some of those things were about corporate greed and corruption, about institutionalized racism and police brutality, about concerns with our environment like climate change and nuclear proliferation. And all of these things really affected my art practice as well. This is a comic that I made about a creature who lives in harmony with nature but becomes a man and then suffers at the hands of his fellow humans. This is another comic that I did about a family of aliens who fetishize the beauty of Earth, only to find out that Earth was destroyed long ago. And most recently, I made an animation about a homeless man who made a home for himself inside of a train car, but it continues to be shunned by all the people that he comes into contact with. And as you can see, I was struck with a little bit of hopelessness after being more educated about all of these topics. And I think it's easy to feel hopeless when there's still news coming out today about how Flint, Michigan hasn't had clean water for 4 years now. Syria has been at war since 2011. This article is from yesterday. We suffer from terrible leadership. And in the 21st century, there's been a bad habit of people wanting to share the most positive parts of themselves or their realities while hiding the darker parts. And to be honest, it seems like the world has been like this for a very long time. Since the beginning of humanity, we've always been at war, and we have always hurt each other in the environment that we lived in. So with this in mind, I thought about if we keep doing this, what our future could look like. And my thesis project is a comic called Sun Cell, which takes place about 100 years from now. And in this world of Sun Cell, it's a world of rations, pervasive military presence, younger generations cleaning up the messes of older generations, and an environmental wasteland. The comic is told from the perspective of Yam, who is a teenage boy living in Battery City, which is a military commune. And he's a pretty ordinary child. There's nothing too special about him other than the fact that he questions the world around him, or at least he is beginning to question the world around him. The story of Sun Cell itself is a pretty mundane day in the life of 3 children that live in this society. And I think it was important to show kind of a more mundane lifestyle of these kids, because while they're in the future and the future is pretty dark, they still retain their humanity, and they're able to cultivate relationships with each other that are similar to the relationships that we have today with each other. So while the future that I portray is pretty bleak, I also want to portray a hopeful message. If you have a chance to read the comic, you might think that it's a little dark and depressing, but this is only volume 1. And the whole point of the series is to show that I don't think we should give up on each other and on Earth. There's a lot of positive news stories coming out as well. We're making a lot of progress with environmental concerns, and we're electing progressive leaders. So I think that humans and nature can live peacefully together. Thank you. I think that if you're in world building any kind of story, there are challenges in grounding yourself in reality. At least that's how it was for me. I think that it was easy to retreat into kind of like an apocalyptic fantasy and forget about like reality and humans and like normal day-to-day life. So that was something that I tried to focus on when I wrote this comic. I originally wanted to do an animation for my thesis project, but as I started writing this story, the world kind of got larger and larger, and if you guys are familiar with animation, it takes a really long time to do. And I did 38 pages in a year, and I probably would have been able to do maybe 3 or 4 minutes in a year, so the story would have been much shorter. And I had to actually break up the story into volumes anyway, even in comic form. So if I were to do like episodes of animation, it would be like 100 episodes or something. So that's why I did comic form. Yeah, I love manga. That's what got me into comics and animation. I also really love Moebius. I think I look to Moebius the most for inspiration, specifically for this in the Claire Linia style, because it's like one like pen weight. And I also, as for the writing style, I looked a lot to Taiyo Matsumoto, who did like Takon Concrete and Sunny, because he also does kind of like this slice of life, normal but like secretly magical storytelling. So those were kind of like my biggest influences. Pretty much, I think I know what's gonna happen, but I mean, even with this first volume, so much changed, so I'm very open to seeing how the story progresses. I feel like a lot of it writes itself, and the characters kind of become like their own characters that kind of like, oh, this person would do this, and this is what would happen, so I'm just excited to see where that will go. I think it was coming from an animation background and going into comics, because I had done a few shorter comics before, but I never like undertook something like this. So like for example, with animation, you're composing shots, but for comics, you're composing several panels on each page, and you don't have control over the timing, like the way that the viewer consumes the media. Like a person could just be staring at a page forever, and like if I want you to turn the page really fast, how do I do that? So I think those were the things that I struggled with a lot in the beginning.